We don't know the schedule yet, but I picked the perfect team to start the 2026 Green Bay Packers season.
You are Locked On Packers, your daily Green Bay Packers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Packers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm Peter Bukowski, and I cover the Packers for The Leap, a newsletter I would love for you to subscribe to. Thanks to everyone who makes Locked On Packers their first listen every day. We hope you like starting your day with us as much as we like starting our day with you here on the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. On the show today, I want to talk about wide receiver targets, everyone's favorite topic. I want to talk about the dangers of going all in, and I want to do a cross-sport comparison in all of that. But I'm going to start with the perfect week one. Today's episode brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. So this was a question that was discussed a little bit on social media yesterday, and I took some time to think about it. Because I was like, okay, what you want in a first game is for the Packers now, Micah Parsons probably not going to play. Tucker Kraft, if he plays, is not going to be all the way back into football shape potentially. Zach Tom, same thing. Devontae Wyatt will be playing his first game in a long time coming off his injury. And now you're elevating Matthew Golden. You're reshuffling an offensive line. So you want to win, right? But if you play the Jets in week one, and by the way, the Packers are a blue blood NFL franchise. They're a cornerstone franchise. They're not going to open the season with the New York Jets. You feel really good about beating the Jets, but that's not really the point, right? There's also the Badger game at Lambeau to think about. So I'm kind of assuming they're going to start the season on the road. But even without that, I worked backward. Who do I think would be advantageous to play more toward the end of the season? And I want the Bears and the Lions middle to end because you want your full complement of guys. You want to beat those teams. You don't want to replay the Lions week one. You don't want to replay the Bears week one. And I do think the NFL schedule makers are going to account for the loss of the star power of Micah Parsons with the way that they handle at least week one for the Packers. Now, there's been some conjecture that the Bears are going to start against the defending Super Bowl champions in week one. So you don't have that. There's not enough juice in some of these other games, and that's the other part of this. Is this Packers team, last year at least, had some issues getting up for the game. And I understand it's week one, you should be juiced for week one regardless. But if you get Packers-Jets week one, I don't think the Packers are going to be as up for that game. If you get Packers-Panthers, even though the Panthers beat them last year, I don't think they're going to get as up for that game. You don't want it to be the Bills because, again, no Micah Parsons. You don't want it to be the Patriots or the Rams or the Texans or even the Cowboys. And you don't really want to waste the Dolphins game in September if you can avoid it, right? That's a home game. So even if they're going to start at home, you want that game to be in December. Now, that's probably not going to happen, frankly, because the Packers are going to play probably the Bears and the Lions and the Vikings in December. And you throw in another game in there. We'll see. Last year, they had that Ravens game randomly in there. Maybe it's the Patriots, which would be fun to go to Foxborough late in the season. But I landed on the Minnesota Vikings in Minneapolis. And the reason is it threads that needle. It hits that Goldilocks zone of it's a game you got to be up for because it's a divisional game. And goal number one in Green Bay, always win the division. So you've got that part of it nailed down. But That team is in a little bit of flux. They're in transition. They're going to make some changes to their offense. They're bringing in Kyler Murray because the JJ McCarthy experiment failed so spectacularly. And so, first week with a new starter, new offense potentially. They've sent some pieces out on the defense. They're in a transition. And I know there's going to be some people that are going to talk themselves into the Vikings because of some of the offensive players. And I get it. And Kevin O'Connell's a really good head coach. I think this is it's a team you're going to have to get up to play because it's not like they're pushovers. They're going to be well coached. But the Packers are better than the Vikings. And you want that Packers home game against the Vikings to be later in the season. You want Kyler Murray to be running around freezing his nuggies off in late December, early January. That's what you want. So you want that Lambeau game late in the year. Now, they're not going to be able to play all their divisional games that they're going to play late in the season in Green Bay. That's just not the way the schedule works. They're going to have to go on the road. I assume there's going to be a late Packers-Bears game either in Chicago or in Green Bay. But there's going to be a Packers-Bears game week 15, week 16, week 7, one of those weeks. And it might be the finale because they're going to want to have that be a potential Sunday night game, big eyeballs, all that stuff. I don't think they're going to want to waste that early in the season. And again, it sounds like the Bears already have their week 1 opponent. So this, to me, is the perfect way to start. And I mentioned the offensive line flux. The Vikings just traded their best pass rusher. This is not a front like Caleb Banks. Is Caleb Banks going to be ready to play? Like, they used a first-round pick on him. He's very talented, but he's dealing with a major foot injury. Yes, I understand a doctor cleared him to play, but that doesn't mean he's going to be ready. This is their starting front 7 right now, according to the Ourlads depth chart. Caleb Banks, who they just drafted, Dominique Orange, who they just drafted, and Jalen Redmond. That's their 3-man front. On the edge, it's Dallas Turner, who's never been a full-time starter and never really been a high producer, and Andrew Van Ginkel, who is a nice player and a very good fit for Brian Flores' system, but is not someone where you're like, oh no, we got to go up against that guy this week. And behind them, they've got absolutely no depth on the edge. Bo Richter and Tyler Batty are names I promise I did not make up. And along the defensive front, it's Levi Drake Rodriguez and Tyrion Ingram Dawkins. Those are their backup interior defenders. This is a soft, and I don't mean like they play soft. I just mean it's not a very talented front. And so if you're going to break in a new offensive line, this is the front to do it against. It's not the world's best secondary. Byron Murphy is a nice player, but I mean, who's going to start in that secondary? A lot of questions. They drafted Charles Demings in the 5th round. They've got Isaiah Rodgers, who had one great game last year and was otherwise meh. If you're going to elevate Matthew Golden, this is the week to do it. Now, Brian Flores against the new offensive line is going to test all your rules, is going to drive you crazy. But okay. Jordan Love knows what to do against this defense. We've seen Jordan Love slice and dice this defense with inconsistent offensive line play last year. So to me, the perfect way to start this off is in Minnesota. You get that road game out of the way because maybe by the end of the year, they found something with Kyler Murray. They've got the defense going. These young guys are up to speed, and it's a different ballgame. You want that game to be at Lambeau, and you want it to be later in the season. So I'm not predicting this, but I thought it was an interesting exercise to try and talk through, okay, what is the best way for the Packers to open the season that is the most advantageous to them while also understanding the variables that are going to be at play here. Yes, it'd be great to open with the Jets, be 1-0, and move forward. That's not going to happen. Now, I mentioned those receivers and putting this all into some perspective here with these wide receiver target shares. Who's going to be the wide receiver one? Who's going to be what's the hierarchy? It's more complicated than you think, but also it's not. We'll talk about it next. Workplace chaos, deadlines stacking up, inbox overflowing, and the one position you have to fill still sitting open. When the pressure's on and you need the right hire, that's a job for sponsored jobs. Indeed, sponsored jobs helps you reach the people who actually fit what you're looking for: skills, experience, location, so you're not just hoping the right candidate stumbles across your post. And here's a stat that says it all. In the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours have made 27 hires on Indeed worldwide, according to Indeed data. So if you're hiring, spend less time searching and more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show will get $75 in sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? That's a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Don't forget to check out the Everydayer Club for ad-free episodes and access to the group chat with me and other listeners of Locked On Packers. Tap the link in the show notes or go to lockedonpackers.supercast.com for more. In an article I wrote yesterday for The Leap, I tried my hand at projecting targets for 2026. And the reason this is tricky, and this is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about it, is we've just never seen an offense like this for Green Bay. The Davante Adams, Aaron Rodgers offense was get the ball to Davante Adams and everyone else get in where you fit in. And then the offense for Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur has been everybody eats. The ball finds energy. The most egalitarian offense in the NFL. Put it on a t-shirt for me. And Romeo Doubs is gone. Dontavian Wicks is gone. So what does streamlining this offense actually look like? 131 targets are going out the door from last season with Romeo Doubs and Dontavian Wicks. And there were some years where it was 160 targets. So now you're looking at a base set of receivers: Christian Watson, Matthew Golden, Jaden Reed, and then Tucker Kraft. So I set a baseline of 500 passing attempts. They may not all be Jordan Love's. Packers had 489 last year. I expect they'll pass a little more, but I don't think a lot more. Maybe it'll be 520, but 500 for round numbers made it easy. Now, before the injury last year, Tucker Kraft got 18% of targets in the Packers offense when he played. That is not enough. And George Kittle, over the course of his career, regularly got in the 20 to 26 range. And so I expect that Tucker Kraft is going to blow past that number. I think he could get in that 22 to 25% target share range. If he gets 20% of the targets, Christian Watson was just a shade under that last year. That would mean 100 targets, right? And that's one of the reasons why I picked 500. Well, Jake Ferguson and Juwan Johnson last year had 100 targets. That is not a crazy number for a tight end if he stays healthy. It would be the most that any single player has ever had for Matt LaFleur. But that's why this is tricky to try and reconnoiter. Last year, Christian Watson, 19.9% target share. But so what is really more telling to me is target rate with these receivers. When they're on the field, how often are they getting the ball? Well, Christian Watson was getting the ball almost 25% when he was on the field, but he was sharing the field. So that's a little bit of a different thing. I think Christian Watson can and will get more targets than Tucker Kraft if he stays healthy. I think he could get to 110 or more. If he got 22% of targets, that would be 110 targets. For Jaden Reed, I don't think much is going to change for him. He has regularly gotten, when he's been healthy, 23 and 24, 70, 80 targets. I think he could get 85 targets in this offense, which is the second most of his Packers tenure. I just think the fact that he is only an 11 personnel guy hurts his upside. He had a 20% target rate in his first 3 seasons every single year when he's been on the field. He is going to get the ball. So the idea that Matthew Golden is just going to slot in and get 100 targets is just not in the realm of reality. Now, that is an interesting piece of this. So you take the Watson targets, take my target for Tucker Kraft, take the Reed targets, and you're talking about 300, a shade under 300 of the 500 targets. Well, Josh Jacobs is going to get 40. The backup running backs are going to get 20 to 30. And Musgrave and the backup tight ends are going to get 15 to 20. So let's call it now 385, which was how the math broke out of 500. The most targets a third receiver has seen in the Love era is 75. But that was when 3 guys got 70 plus. So I don't know how this is going to ultimately shake out. Matthew Golden had a shade under 12% target share last year. But for the first 8 weeks of the season, when he was playing starter snaps, he finished 35th in yards per route run. That was better than guys like Michael Pittman, Jamison Williams, Devontae Smith, A.J. Brown. And when he played 40% of snaps in a game, he got a shade under 4 targets per game. That projected out would be 68 targets for the season. If he got to 75, that would mean another 40 targets for Savion Williams, Bo Melton, Sky Moore, Josh Wiley. That seems that fits. That fits the structure of the offense. That fits the geometry of the offense, the architecture of the offense. Christian Watson is going to be your wide receiver 1 this year, but Tucker Kraft is going to be the 1B, and I think in a lot of ways he will be 1A. He just is not, this offense is not quite built for him to get the volume, at least as currently constructed. But that's why I think the Shanahan offense, the George Kittle comparison, is so apt, because we know within the way that this team wants to play, Tucker Kraft can play 85% of snaps. He could theoretically play every snap. They just, you wouldn't want to overload him that way with all the burden that he has as a blocker. You want him fresh to catch passes on third down. I think him being your third down guy, your red zone guy, and I think he was 3rd in red zone target share last year. So in the red zone, they're still looking for Tucker Kraft. He is going to be your red zone problem solver. We talked about wanting to get the right guy for the Romeo Dobbs, the third down roles. I still think a lot of that is going to be that fall on Tucker Kraft. Matthew Golden is going to have to be a part of that too. I think Jaden Reed's usage more or less stays the same. What I think you elevate is Christian Watson, because he was that good last year. You elevate Tucker Kraft. And then rather than 2 or 3 guys getting a ball of targets, you have Matthew Golden consuming more of those. And we have, I think, the most traditional setup we've seen from the Packers in the Matt LaFleur era, really of any other team, because most teams don't have just one guy who gets 1 billion targets and no one else gets anything. Like, you look at the best receivers around the NFL, like Justin Jefferson, yeah, he gets the lion's share of targets, but like Jordan Addison still gets plenty of work. Jamar Chase has T. Higgins. Now, I think you could say Jackson Smith-Njigba, but he had Cooper Kupp last year. Before that, he had DK Metcalf. Now, last year was the first year he was really an elite player. But a lot of these guys do have capable number 2s. The Packers, they didn't really. They had Devontae Adams and a couple receiver 3s and 4s. That was the architecture of that was unique. And the geometry worked. But they got there in a weird way. And no one else had an offense like the Packers over the last 3 years. No one else had that democratic of a passing game. And I think what they need to do to win in the postseason is to undemocratize it. You need to create some haves and have-nots and make those roles clear. Hey, you're going to be the guy. Now, that doesn't mean everything funnels through you like you're Devontae. It just means, hey, most of these plays are going to get called for you now. And there's going to be plenty of other guys who get plenty of other work, but in a lot of these situations, this is the deal. And I think this is going to make this Packers team better. Now, they have done the all-in thing. They have traded for Micah Parsons. They have hurt their ability to add to this team this year and next year for the chance to go win a title this year. That's great that they did that, and I fully support that they did that. That doesn't mean it doesn't come with downsides. Let's talk about it next. We can stream anything, order food in minutes, do everything from our phones, and somehow buying tickets to live events still feels way harder than it should be. Long lines, confusing checkout, prices jumping at the last second. It shouldn't be this complicated. That's why we have Game Time. It gives fans the advantage and makes getting tickets fast and simple. You can see the full price up front, no surprise fees at checkout. The seat views are huge. You can check the exact view before you buy. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to every type of event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON, locked on, for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. I understand the criticism of Brian Gutekunst and really Ted Thompson, maybe more so, was this notion that they're always on two timelines. And that the one timeline, the future timeline, ultimately distracts the Packers, or worrying about that timeline impairs their ability to live in the now, to attack for the now. I have found that criticism of Brian Gutekunst in particular to be lacking. They did not have any money in 2020 and 2021 to do much of anything, and those teams were ready to go, ready to compete. Now, they could have done more in 2022, but I think they saw that as a transitional year. They had paid Aaron Rodgers, hey, stick with us, kid, and we'll get you through. He didn't want to do that. He didn't want to babysit. And look, I get it. He wanted to be somewhere else. He wanted to be heard. He did not feel appreciated. And, maybe he came to realize the grass is not always greener. And now he's jerking around Pittsburgh and they can have him. And I've used this metaphor before, and I think it's even more apt now. We're getting the reporting that the Bucks and Giannis likely set for divorce is the wrong way of putting it, more like conscious uncoupling. Because this team is not there, and they don't really have an avenue to get there unless they can use the 10th pick to trade for a player that is good enough to entice Giannis to stay. You want to trade for Trey Murphy with the 10th pick? Yeah, great, do that. Does that give the Bucks enough to go compete with the Knicks and the Celtics? Probably not, but it might be enough to get Giannis to stay. That being said, you go back to the move that got them the title, and that was the Jrue Holiday trade. Well, the Jrue Holiday trade is what is imperiling their draft picks now and in the future. And what has prevented them over the last couple of years, along with some bad drafts and some bad contracts, from getting them over the goal line. And injuries to Giannis have been a huge factor too, right? If Giannis doesn't get hurt in the Heat series a couple years ago, maybe Mike Budenholzer doesn't get fired. We don't get Adrian Griffin. We don't get Doc Rivers. And who knows what the butterfly wings, what reality they flap us into. But in that period of time, they did everything you would want a team to do around a superstar. They traded for Damian Lillard. They did the big thing. They I thought that trade made so much sense for the Bucks. Chris Middleton was getting old, and I don't want to make this a Bucks podcast. Go listen to Locked On Bucks if you want that. But I'm trying to make a point here that they made all the big splashy moves. And it's not just about making big splashy moves. They went all in every year. Okay, Jrue Holiday, that's not working. What makes sense? Damian Lillard, bang, let's do that. It didn't work. But I totally defend, and I think most fans would want their team to say, hey, we've got a generational talent. We got to go for it. Let's go all in. And then when Damian Lillard didn't work, hey, he's got a torn Achilles. Let's figure something out. Let's get creative here. And you ended up, unfortunately, stretching Damian Lillard and signing Miles Turner, and Miles Turner just is not the player in Milwaukee that they hoped he would be. Now, it would probably look a lot different if he got to play every night against, opposite Giannis. But the point in all this is to say, just because every year you try really hard and you make the big moves that are the win now moves, merely making win now moves, even defensible in the moment win now moves. And again, the Drew Holiday trade, of course, defensible and won them the title. I still believe the Damian Lillard trade was defensible. Doesn't mean it's going to lead you to a title. And in fact, more often than not, it doesn't, precisely because only one team gets to win. So now, if you're the Packers, you've put yourself in a position where you traded draft capital for Micah Parsons, and that means you don't have the premium assets to add cheap players to this team. Now, the Packers cap situation is fine. They're not in a problematic financial place. And oh, by the way, they have Micah freaking Parsons. And the ridiculous comments from Cowboys fans like, oh, see, this is Micah. It's like, what are you talking about? It's not like injuries were part of his issue in Dallas. He's been one of the best players in the NFL, full stop, since he came into the league. You want to talk about, okay, some big games, he hasn't always been his best. Guess what? One player on defense can only do so much. Quarterbacks, skill talent guys where you can draw up plays for those guys who score touchdowns. It's just a different thing. You can game plan to stop one pass rusher if that's all you have. And that has consistently been, by the way, all Dallas has had. They were bad before they got Micah. They were pretty good on defense every year they had Micah, and elite some years, and then terrible again without him. I think that tells you the kind of player he is. And the Packers are better with Micah Parsons than without him, and they're better with Micah Parsons than with 2 first-round picks. But now you don't have those to build around this roster, and you are setting yourself up if this doesn't work. If they don't win the Super Bowl this year or next year. Now you're in a position where they have plenty of cap space next year to go sign guys, but that's your only avenue to add premium talent is to have to go overpay in the free agent market. And you don't have that premium draft capital to trade, which means your day 2 picks become more valuable to you, but not any more valuable to anybody else. So your second round pick in 2027, you want to get someone at the deadline, you want to do what the Rams did with Von Miller. Your second round pick, if you had a first, it would be less valuable to you than it is now. But you don't have one. And so now it's more valuable to you than it is to anybody else. And that discrepancy can create problems because you want to give up a third. Well, they want a second. Well, a second would be reasonable if you had the draft capital to make that work. Now you run into this 2 timelines problem. That's not to say don't trade the second round pick, but we've seen the Packers wanted to trade a second round pick for Chase Claypool, and that would have been a disaster. So this is not to rain on anyone's parade by any means. But I think there are plenty of examples. In fact, most examples of teams going all in are examples of teams failing to win. And then what do? How do you recover? That's why having a plan, a short-term and a long-term plan, makes sense. The Packers usually have both. Now they've got to thread that needle. We'll see if they can do it. Back tomorrow, much more on the Locked On Packers podcast as we move through the off season. I don't know that we have big milestones coming with mandatory mini camps and all that stuff. We're not getting a ton about the rookies just because they're not doing a ton. That's okay. Still, subscribe to us here. We're here every single day for you. Subscribe on the social medias, wherever you happen to be on the social medias. Subscribe to the podcast, wherever you happen to get podcasts. If you never miss an episode, the Everydayer Club is built for you. Get ad-free episodes of Locked On Packers, plus access to our group chat, the members-only Discord server. Head to the link in the show notes or go to lockedonpackers.supercast.com for more. For those of you on video, we send you to the first ever 24/7 national NFL YouTube channel on audio. Make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. And always stay Locked On Packers.